Holy roast potatoes, it's 2026 and I'm actually talking about a new Karnivool album. It's not fake, not a dream, it's actually real, and I'm still taking psychic damage from the fact that it's been 13 years since we last had a full-length studio release from these now legendary Australians. I was beginning to doubt I would ever see a day like this, where I have the rare and delighted privilege to hear new music from one of my favourite bands after such an enormous gap in their musical CV. But time damages all things, and I am not the same person I was 13 years ago. So have the mighty Vool done enough to still have a stake in this game, or is this baker's dozen of an absence something that should never have been revived? Guys, gals, and non-binary pals, my name is Ian, this is Rhyme Signatures, and we are once again opening the lid on the best new releases in prog, rock, and metal. Do I really need to introduce you to Karnivool? Really? I mean, if you are in any way at all interested in modern progressive rock and metal, then the idea of you not being aware of Karnivool is like going to Disneyland and asking who the f*** is Donald Duck. But to give some context to those of you who might have missed out on their initial run, Karnivool were an odd beast when they first landed in 2005 with their debut album of Themata. It was this curious blend of contemporary nu metal and grunge-infused alt-rock that managed to land itself in a Tool-adjacent landscape of its very own. It was scrappy, full of pep and energy, and permitted the band to truly superhero landing their way onto the scene. But it was 2009's Sound Awake that made them the poster child of modern prog. That album remains to this day one of the most affecting, brilliant, and utterly undefeatable albums of all time. It is easy top 5 material across all genres, and just thinking about the xylophone that opens up the album on Simple Boy is enough to give me all over body goosebumps, as I know that for the next 72 minutes I'm going to be completely enthralled by the music. Even now, some 17 years later, it is as culturally and musically relevant as it ever has been, and remains the bedrock as to why this band is so revered. But then, 2013's Asymmetry happened, and it left a lot of the fans of the band kind of confused, myself included. It was this weird, oddly experimental piece that felt off-kilter and disjointed compared to the two pillars that preceded it. In the best case, it was just a little different and quirky, and in the worst, it made people question if the band's spark had been fizzling out. I did recently feature this album on a video where I talk about records that I initially hated but grew to love, and I will stand by that. Asymmetry took around 10 years to finally make sense to me, and now that I've figured it all out, it's only another perfect piece in the enigma that is the design of Karnivool. But it's 2026, and Inverses, the long-awaited I'll Believe It When I Hold It in My Hands fourth album from this legendary group, is real. It's here, it's got all the hype and hope of the entire prog-loving world sitting behind it, and I cannot even begin to tell you how delighted I am that Karnivool are back, and they have not missed a beat in their extended absence. Okay, let's make something abundantly clear before we get into things. Inverses is not as initially good as Sound Awake was when I first heard it. Now, some of you might find this news disappointing, but the reality is that this was never going to be in direct competition with it. It's unfair to expect or demand replicating the lightning in a bottle that was Karnivool's 2009 masterpiece. Now, that isn't to say that with time this won't be viewed in a similar light to Sound Awake. This hasn't had 17 years of appreciation and goodwill to build up behind it after all. What this is, though, is still an exemplary album, and more than worth the extended waiting time we've all had to endure. So, what is the vibe? What's the idea? Each Karnivool album has, after all, sounded extremely distinct from each other. Themata was rooted in nu metal and alt-rock, Sound Awake embraced their proggy side, drawing direct comparisons to Tool, and Asymmetry is Asymmetry. I've been trying to think of an appropriate way of summarizing what Inverses sounds like, and I saw a comment on Sputnik Music that seemed appropriate, so I'm just going to flash that up here for all of our benefit. This is a nice amalgamation of the band's previous sounds, but with a hint towards new ideas that help to keep the band relevant in a modern market that has most assuredly moved on since we last heard from them. It feels a much more accessible album than Sound Awake does, but that does come with a slight dip in terms of its replay value, at least at this point in time. The opening track of Ghost starts slowly, moving with a delicate kind of purpose before the rug gets pulled out from underneath you, and the band's characteristic heaviness demonstrated on Sound Awake comes roaring into life. The bass that drops you into the deep end around a minute or so in will go down in history as one of the greatest moments in Karnivool's entire discography. It's brilliant. Ian Kenny is clearly an immortal being, as his voice hasn't aged a day. His distinctive, clear, and expressive tone is a welcome thing to hear again. The band all sound fantastic, the production is sublime, and Ghost is about as good an opening statement as we could have ever hoped for, as Karnivool proudly announce themselves back to the world. It does also know when to slow down, though, giving plenty of opportunities for the rock to accelerate past the metal, with plenty of time for the guitars to morph into delicate and thoughtful forms with loads of creative spark and sizzle to the compositions. It feels like no time whatsoever has passed between releases. Now, quite a few of the songs on Inverses were released as singles prior to the album coming out, but I stood my ground and refused to spoil myself before it came out. And Drone is the first of these in the album sequence that we come across. This starts up rather appropriately with a machine-like feel before segueing into a hypnotic guitar pattern encouraging a slow nod of the head and a gentle tap of the foot. This is Karnivool at their thoughtful best. It's a slow-burning track that highlights the band's exceptional ability to play with texture and feeling above musical technicalities. There's as much time taken here on the space between notes as there is with creating a musical tapestry. The verses are so rhythmic and satisfying that the runtime just flies by. Eozora marks itself out as a clear favourite and big highlight on the album, opening with an offbeat drum pattern keeping us on our toes, but with some grungy guitars building in the background before the rest of the band explodes into action at around 50 seconds in. It's got a great sense of grit and hookiness to it. The chorus showcase Ian Kenny's clarity and confidence. He honestly sounds better than ever here, and he hasn't been sitting around doing nothing in the interim period between albums, let me tell you that. Waiting for that great escape, he repeats with barely contained emotion. I'm just kind of sitting here like, yeah, same bro. The fourth track of Animation starts off quietly with a deceptively understated intro before a thick and warming bass line cuts things off and settles into an absolutely decadent groove, with brief guitar stabs flying in just to keep you on your toes. The chorus sounds massive, and it is certain to go down a storm in a live setting. This is one of the shorter cuts on the album, but there's nothing on here that feels brief, if that makes any kind of sense. At around the midpoint of the album, the band slows things down and starts playing with spacier, softer tracks. Conversations is the first example of this, with the band feeling out musical textures and soundscapes more than trying to find a killer riff or massive heavy breakdown. Kenny comes across as an emotional well, full of a kind of wounded vulnerability that shows his feelings on his sleeve. It does meander a bit in the midsection and could possibly benefit from a bit of trimming of the fat, but it is a fine track nonetheless. Reanimation is the second of this mid-album break run, but I much prefer this one to the previous track. Karnivool have made the informed decision to bring in one of my favourite guitarists of all time, Guthrie Govan, for some guest musicianship. But if I'm being 100% honest with you, I have been hard-pressed to pinpoint exactly when it is that he comes in, which, in truth, is a little bit disappointing. The layered vocals in the opening of the song set an appropriately atmospheric mood as Kenny waxes lyrical about feeling alone in a crowded place, which kind of gives a bit of a thematic callback to the lyrics, "Hey, let's get lost in a crowd" from Sound Awake, which I thought was kind of fun. Is it intentional? I've no idea. The vibe is almost romantic in a way, with stripped-down instrumentation in the verses giving way to massive chords and cinematic scale as the chorus kicks in. All it takes is actually a song from a few years ago that's been retooled to fit on the album, but honestly, this didn't mean much to me, as I'd been deliberately avoiding listening to it until it appeared on a future album. And honestly, I'm glad that my stubborn patience paid off, as the song absolutely rips. The drums and bass that kicks things off are immediate and engaging and give way to a fiercely addictive driving guitar riff. And again, the spaces between the notes what bring out the real colour in this song. These little micro pauses and almost uncomfortable phrasing make this such a memorable part of the album. Now, I'll be honest with you though, when remote self-control kicks in, the album almost loses me for a little bit. This is the only song on the record that I'm not sure where I stand with at this point. There's something weirdly out of sorts with how this one sounds in conjunction with the rest of the album. Something about the vocals, the guitar tone, and just the overall vibe is a little bit weird for me. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still a great song when you take it in isolation, but I'm not sure how well it fits within the context of the album as a whole. But you know what? All is forgiven with the final two-hit combo of the album, which I feel is where Karnivool really shows off what they've been building with on In Verses. Opal is a heartbreaker with gentle violins sitting softly under Kenny's beautiful and heartfelt vocals. Yes, it's a long drawn-out ballad, but it's a bloody fantastic long drawn-out ballad. Now, some would make the argument that this isn't what they want from a Karnivool song, and would perhaps say it fits better on Kenny's other band, Birds of Tokyo. But frankly, I'm in love with this more reflective side of themselves and will champion their want to do more of this kind of music. This is a far cry from how Sound Awake closed things out over its respective duo of closing tracks, but we're not trying to replicate that album, are we? The closing keyboards here give me serious Pineapple Thief vibes circa What Have We Sown, and I am all here for it. And then there's that final track of Salva, which for my money is one of the best songs the band has ever released. If ever there was a song that encapsulated the idea of thank you for your patience and thank you for believing in us, then it's this one. There's a real sense of climactic finality to the song's tone and overall vibe. You can practically see a montage of the band's lives playing out over the last 13 years on a projection screen. It's full of a sense of nostalgic longing, pulling at my heartstrings in a way I just was not expecting. But it is really that last few minutes that got my jimmies properly rustled. The bagpipes are generally speaking a divisive instrument, yes, but their inclusion here is absolute genius and makes for one of the most memorable songs in the band's entire discography. Jury's out if we'll ever see an album 5, but if we don't, and this is Karnivool's swan song, then my god, what a beautiful melancholic note to play out on. Overall, it's hard to pick any genuine fault with the album, especially considering how strong this comes across given the massive gap between records. There was always the possibility that given the break, the band would have lost touch with their ability to write memorable and engaging music. But if anything, they've strengthened themselves. Now, there are a couple of wobbles here and there, with some meandering to be found in the midsection, and remote self-control feeling like an odd juxtaposition of styles compared to the rest of the album, but these are small nitpicks considering how long we've had to wait. In Verses is the album we've deserved, the album we've hoped and waited for, and I still can't quite believe that it's actually real and I can actually just go ahead and listen to it. So, what else can I possibly say about Karnivool's In Verses? Look, this kind of gap between albums is never an easy thing. Not for the band, not for the listener, not for anyone. It can foster a sense of unease and of uncertainty. Have they lost their spark? Can they still remember how to play their instruments? There's always so many questions and often not enough answers. But Karnivool had not gathered the faith of the progressive world without reason. Even their most controversial album, Asymmetry, is now held with a much higher regard than when it first came out, as a lot of people are now looking at it in hindsight and seeing the vision that was always there, even if it didn't make a lot of sense at the time. In Verses has arrived in time to remind the world precisely why this band is so respected. From any other band, this album would have been a revelation, but to come from Karnivool so late into their career, and with so much time between releases, it only enhances how satisfying the overall experience with the album feels. It's more immediate than Asymmetry, but not quite as deep as Sound Awake, making for an album that feels like a refreshing return to form from the band, but it's unlikely that this will be as beloved as their 2009 classic. But what the hell do I know? I'm certainly no soothsayer, and I can't predict how Inverses will be viewed in 17 years' time now, can I? I did pre-order this one months ago because, quite frankly, I needed to ensure my collection was completed, but I'd still be recommending a physical purchase here, guys. It's an absolutely shocking turn of events that something we've waited this long for is not only worth listening to, but is genuinely brilliant and showcases that Karnivool never lost the spark that made them special. This is all, of course, guys, just my opinion. If you've given this one a listen, let me know if you loved it, if you hated it. Whatever you want to say about it, please drop your thoughts in the comments down below. Please do drop me a thumbs up if you've been enjoying the video. Please do tell your friends about little old me, and do please consider subscribing to the channel. It will really help me out in my quest for world domination. But until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.